Let us offer our consecration to the Lord. Lord, we offer up to you this day, and we ask that your name be glorified in all that we do. We ask that we may love you, honor you, and serve you. We ask that we may always be reflections of your truth. We ask that we may embrace your ways so that we may show love to others. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Well, today is an interesting day. Besides, of course, you have the readings. Today is the memorial of Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, Virgin and Martyr. And if you don't know who she is, she's one of the newer saints within, I think she was canonized a saint by Pope Saint John Paul II, or maybe it was, I got to look that up, Pope Saint John Paul II, or it may have actually been Pope Benedict XVI. Now, that's really an important understanding of her because you have to realize who she was. Her actual born name was Edith Stein. She was born into a Jewish family, and she began to have this search for truth. She served as a nurse in World War I. She was a philosophy teacher, and she sought this quest for truth, and she came to discover the Catholic faith. She came to discover Christ, and she entered a Carmelite monastery. Last month, we talked about Saint Benedict, who was the founder of the monastery way of life. Well, she entered the Carmelite monastery. Carmelite monastery is very different than a Benedictine monastery. They live in enclosure. There's a special word for that, and I always seem to forget it. Let me think it. See, I had to shut off the recording so I could remember that word. It's one of those things. That word, I got it so close. And the word is cloister. So what a cloister is, when someone is in a monastery they're like cloistered members of the monastery, what they do is they live behind an enclosure. They just like anywhere else, they live in this enclosure, but they have very little contact with the outside world. Maybe a good example of this, among others, but the one I can always think of is if you drive out to Spencer, Massachusetts, and visit St. Benedict's Abbey. And that's a cloistered abbey. So there is a time where you can see the monks praying. That's about the only contact you will have for them, except for the monk who runs the store at the bottom of the hill just as you get onto Abbey property. Other than that, you'll have very little contact with them because they don't have much contact with the outside. They're the monks I've talked to you about before who make Trappist jelly. There's another set of Cistercian is the official name, but they're also called Trappist nuns in Rentham, Massachusetts, and they make Trappist candy. Trappistine, sorry. A female Trappist is called a Trappistine. So they make Trappistine candy. So they live in what is known as the cloister. So they live in a very unique environment where they have very little contact with the outside world. That's the world of where we live. It's not the world of nature. They have a huge amount of contact with the world of nature. And if you want to just go up and be in a quiet place to meditate on the nature around you, you can go do that without entering the cloister up at St. Joseph's Abbey on their property. They even have benches where you can sit there, and it's just gorgeous, just a beautiful place to be. I was thinking about that the other day because sometimes I get, sometimes you get into these agitated moods, and you realize you haven't taken some time off in a while. And one of the places I used to go was up there and pray, do my holy hour in the Abbey, and then spend some time in nature. And I haven't done that in a while, so you need to get back out to the Abbey. So anyway. But I wouldn't enter the cloister. I would be outside. And that's an example of a cloister. I remember when I visited a cloister, obviously on the outside, and needed to buy a book because they'll sell books. And as you know, in St. Joseph Abbey in Spencer, they have a bookstore. It's great books at the bottom of the bookstore. Great books. They sell the books and the jelly. They don't sell Spencer beer, which I understand it may not be sold much longer. Hopefully that isn't the truth because it's great beer. But they don't sell Spencer beer because they're not licensed to. But they sell their jellies and everything else. But you will actually be able to talk. It's like being in a regular store. So you'll be able to talk to one of the monks and everything else. In this particular cloister, you would give the nun who would be on the other side of a Lazy Susan, one of those dollies. So you couldn't see her. You just see this Lazy Susan, and you talk through that to talk to her and say, this is the book I want. She'd go, just a minute, it's so much money. You'd put the money, which was cash at the time, into the Lazy Susan. She would turn it around, take the money, put the book in the Lazy Susan, turn it back around. And so you would be able to get your book. You would buy your book, but you've never had anything besides speaking contact with the nun. Don't even know what she looks like. And that's the kind of environment St. Teresa de Benedicta of the Cross lived in after she entered Carmelite. Before that, of course, she was known as Edith Stein. She died in a concentration camp because she was Jewish. She was Catholic. She was a convert, but she was still Jewish in the Nazis' eyes, and she died in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany. We'll talk more on the other side of the break. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out CatholicTV.com. And don't forget our own website, CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. Check out our website. Check out the archives of the show. Check out our Substack newsletter. Check out all kinds of things over there at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. And don't forget to let people know where you hear this program and where they can hear it here at WEZE 590 AM. And you can also hear all our programs at CatholicAudiomedia.com. So anyway, we're talking about St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, who was originally Edith Stein, but something else to add there. Yesterday I was talking about science and faith. Well, what was Nazi Germany? Science without compassion. It's exactly what it was. It was science without compassion. And actually, maybe that's not even a good description. Science without compassion filled with evil. There you go. That's what Nazi Germany was. And it is said, this was actually Dennis Prager wrote this in his book, The Exodus, in his Rational Bible series, which I'd highly recommend. He's got a new one coming out on Deuteronomy soon. That is not a paid endorsement. That is just letting you know that's the fact, and I'm definitely gonna buy it and read it. But he said in Exodus, one of the reasons why Hitler hated the Jews was because he wanted to destroy the people who were responsible for the Ten Commandments. And if you know, do you really notice the Ten Commandments are nothing but common sense? But he wanted to destroy the people who were responsible for the Ten Commandments. So that really shows this tremendous hatred for the Jews, which obviously I can only describe it as demonic. There's no questions asked about that. It's demonic. And this is what they embraced. But that's what happens when you mix science with nothing but your own science. You actually end up walking down the path that is at the root of our existence, which is original sin. I'll go back to what Reinhold Niebuhr said, who, by the way, was not Catholic. He was Protestant, and he was a Protestant theologian. That's what he's known as. Reinhold Niebuhr said that the only empirically provable doctrine of Christianity is original sin. And there you look at it, we can see that very clearly in all these regimes that reject anything to do with faith and embrace everything to do with their vision, which is always a technological vision. And the Nazis were geniuses in technology. They were evil right across the board. Don't forget, we just passed August 6th. The reason why the Manhattan Project existed was to build the atomic bomb before the Nazis did, and we succeeded. But you can see that with science without faith creates disaster. It always does. Faith without science creates disaster, by the way, as well. You need them both. And she was someone who was very well learned. She was a philosopher. She was a teacher. She was a speaker. And she embraced seeking Christ. She sought Christ. She entered the monastery. But also because of her Jewish roots, she ended up in Holocaust. And the Carmelites testified to the fact that, like St. Maximilian Kolbe, she brought the compassion of Christ to her fellow prisoners, even in a concentration camp. And how could she do that? Because God is present everywhere. This is something else that St. Maximilian Kolbe taught as well. And I talked about that in an interview I had with the associate producer of the movie Two Crowns. In any case, that is a little insight into St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, the Carmelite way of life, and her exact devotion to Christ. We'll be back tomorrow. Have yourself a blessed day, and we'll see you then. If you would like to support our program, please consider a donation to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. There are several ways to consider this. One is to purchase any of our merchandise, which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. There are coffee mugs there. There's also my latest book, Encounter Christ in Your Humanity, all of which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also donate to the show directly through either the Donate tab, also at CatholicAudiomedia.com, or by sending a donation through the U.S. Postal Service with your questions and comments at 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. Finally, the best way you can support our parish is to attend Mass on Sundays at 10 o'clock and be a part of our parish. We thank you for any support you would like to give to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, the sponsoring parish for this media outreach to Catholics and other Christians in the WROL, WEZE, and podcast listening audience. In Cristo vivimos.